Welcome to This Explainer by Forge College. Let's be honest, have you ever sat in a project meeting that just completely derailed because someone, usually right after their third cup of coffee, just felt one network was better than another? Yeah, we've all been there. Well, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're focusing on designing decision criteria within the decision framework. We're picking up right where we left off in our previous lesson on scoping, and we're going to build the ultimate engineering blueprint to end those subjective stakeholder arguments for good.
So, let's dive right into the core problem. How do we take all those conflicting, abstract opinions and actually turn them into an airtight engineering decision? Because if you're relying on a gut feeling to choose between Solana mainnet, DevNet, or a private testnet for your capstone project deployment, that is absolutely going to lead to chaos. We need a system.
Here's the blueprint for our build today. We'll cover 1. From chaos to criteria. 2. Drafting measurable criteria. 3. Setting the scoring rules. 4. Weighing your priorities. 5. Scoring the protocols. And finally, 6. Validating your matrix.
All right, Section 1, From Chaos to Criteria.
Step 1 is all about gathering our raw materials. This means pulling in those constraints and prioritized use cases we scoped out previously. Our ultimate goal for this explainer is building a decision matrix. Think of it as a weighted scoring sheet that translates your scope into measurable tests. We aren't just making a subjective pros and cons list here, we're building an executable comparison table that mathematically ranks our protocol choices. It completely removes the guesswork.
Now, to build that matrix, we need a criterion for each row. A criterion is basically a concrete, defensible, and repeatable test. Simply put, if it cannot be measured, it's not a criterion. It's just a wish. Every single row in our matrix absolutely must map directly back to a prioritized objective.
Moving right along to Section 2, Drafting Measurable Criteria.
You want to start by brainstorming about 7 to 10 candidate criteria, things like reliability, cost, or security. But you can't keep them all. You have to aggressively prune that list down to at least 5 that strictly impact your prioritized use cases. Once you've done that, you add an alignment note. This note literally justifies why the criterion exists in the first place by mapping it right back to your project's scope.
Notice the absolute death of ambiguity here. A vague requirement is asking for something like a fast network. But a measurable criterion? That demands measured median transaction latency under expected load. A truly good criterion tells you exactly how it's going to be measured out in the real world.
Okay, Section 3, Setting the Scoring Rules.
Now that we've got our measurable criteria, we have to calibrate our tools to eliminate any personal bias. Scoring rules map a numeric scale to reality. We highly recommend using a 0 to 5 scale. For example, a 5 means the latency perfectly meets your target, a 3 means it's double the target, and a 0 means it's completely unusable. It needs to be an explicit thresholded statement. This structurally links the criterion definition to hard scoring rules right there in your spreadsheet. The whole point is that if another reviewer looks at your rules, they should be able to score the exact same protocol and arrive at the exact same number. No guessing required.
Which brings us to Section 4, Weighing your priorities.
You've got to decide on a global normalization convention. A great one is having all your weights sum perfectly to 100. Distributing exactly 100 points forces you to make some really tough decisions, and it provides ultimate clarity for your stakeholders. It shows everyone, in plain numbers, what is a nice to have versus a need to have.
You distribute those 100 points based entirely on trade-offs. This is a core concept we explore deeply across all our Forge College courses. And listen, it is absolutely vital to include a weight rationale column. You can't just slap 30 points on performance on a whim. Every single weight needs a brief written justification based on your actual stakeholder requirements.
Section 5, Scoring the Protocols.
This is where all that prep work pays off. Now comes the fun part, feeding our deployment protocols like Solana mainnet, DevNet, and private testnet into the analytical engine we just built. You'll assign a raw score based only on the rules you defined earlier. And right next to that score, you write a 1 to 2 sentence rationale. Say mainnet gets a 4. Your rationale should cite actual observed metrics or documentation, like median latency within 1.2x target in production.
Once you have the raw score, it's time for some simple math. This formula calculates the final weighted contribution per criterion. You simply take the score, divide it by the max score, and multiply it by your weight. You then sum up all those weighted scores to get a final, perfectly comparable protocol total.
But hold on a second. Before you declare a winner, never ever forget to add a text block at the bottom of your spreadsheet listing your assumptions and uncertainties. If you're missing benchmark data, or maybe you're relying on variable third-party SLAs, write it down. You must honestly frame the limits of your math so there are no surprises later.
Finally, Section 6, Validating Your Decision Matrix. Before we export this masterpiece and attach it to our project, we have to run a rigorous quality check against our capstone success criteria. You validate your matrix using 3 core principles. First, traceability. Every weight must trace back to a constraint. Second, reproducibility. Your rules must be blindly reproducible by a peer. And third, iterationary. The whole system can be easily updated if stakeholder priorities shift mid-project. To really test your weights, ask yourself this exact question. If the performance weight were cut in half right now, which decisions would change? If your answer is none, then your weights are purely cosmetic. They don't reflect actual engineering trade-offs. A solid matrix actually responds to shifting priorities. Once your matrix survives that stress test, export your spreadsheet as a CSV. Make sure you tag it with the date and your author initials for version control and attach it to your capstone documentation area. It's now totally ready for the final mapping step where we evaluate the real-world protocols against it.
This quote right here perfectly encapsulates everything we've built today. You aren't just making a list, you've literally engineered an audit trail. You've created an executable document that protects you, aligns your stakeholders, and guarantees a strictly objective deployment decision.
So, I want you to ponder that question as you finalize your spreadsheet. Could a complete stranger use your rules and get the exact same result? Keep refining your criteria until the answer is a confident yes. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Be sure to visit forge.college to dive deeper into this subject and master even more Web3 engineering frameworks just like this one. See you next time.